You might come to death.
Well, I'm referring to anti-terror laws that you've glossed over. I mean, that's the biggest, for me, that's a much bigger issue.
The abortion is very interesting because it's often brought up by people as an example of, for instance, this type of fundamentalism in America. People often cite, abortion doctors that are under threat in America and so on. What is striking about this is I think in the last 20 years, about 9 abortion doctors have been targeted by anti-abortion people. And in each of those cases, the person who threatened and carried an attack was taken to court by the state, prosecuted, put in prison. So it's already, there are, you say, laws about incitement, there are laws that stop people doing harm to others. Now, on the religious hatred subject, this is very important. Because what was attempted in Parliament in 2006 was precisely to stop people saying what they think about religions, even when it's true. This is a very, very important thing to bear in mind. Even if you said something true that could have offended somebody of faith, that would be illegal. Truth, in other words, is no offence. I hope you know what a serious situation it is when the state would pass such a law. It is true that Muhammad didn't hear any voices, just as it is true, in my opinion, that Moses didn't come down from any mountain with any tablets, and also true, in my opinion, that it's less likely that Mary was the first person ever to become pregnant without the insertion of a male member, and more likely that a young Jewish girl told a fib. I think all of these things are obviously true. I think that if you didn't like the fact that I think that, we can have a discussion about that. But again, the idea that the law could get involved, when all three of these things seem perfectly obvious and true, I think is a problem. And a problem which maybe and others who have suggested such laws are a good thing have to consider.
Can somebody, either Douglas or Timothy, tell me what about those cartoons that is so important? Given that they offend so many more people than they please, can somebody just, I mean this non-facetiously, but because I want to know the case, what is it that is so crucial about those cartoons?
Can I answer that straight away? The reason was this, was that Fleming, the Council of General Boston, heard that there was a children's book publishing firm in Denmark who were intending to do a series of children's books about the major religions. And they had done on Christianity, on Buddhism, so on. And they discovered that the one for children about Islam, which, like the others, was an entirely offensive, description of the history of religion for children, that they couldn't find an illustrator who was willing to illustrate the book. And they went around quite a number, and they all said, one of them went to the president anonymously and said, yes, I was thinking of Herman Groff, the murdered filmmaker. And as a result of this, Gerard Poston realised that there was already a self-censorship in Danish society, and that self-censorship like that ought clearly, and I agree with this, to be broken.
But Douglas, what you're not telling the audience is that they were part of that self-censorship. 2 years earlier, they were offered cartoons of the Christ, and they said, we're not going to publish this because it will offend Christians.
Maybe that's not true. That's not true. I'll tell you what happened with that. There was a cartoonist who went to Gerard Poston 2 years earlier with a cartoon. The editor said, we do not think that our readers would appreciate this. But what he meant was, and they have published anti-Christian cartoons. In fact, Fleming brought one along last night. No, they've published ones before as well.
But before the Muslim cartoons, they self-censored on Christian cartoons.
They didn't. Let me just explain exactly. What happened was that this man came with a cartoon. The response, the standard Russia response was, we don't think our readers appreciate this. This is because they decided it wasn't a good cartoon. It wasn't because of its Christianity.
It's all the Muslim ones.
No. It wasn't because of its Christianity that they didn't include it, because they had included and have since cartoons that Christians would find offensive. And this, well, the point is this, that once you've decided that there is something in your society you cannot say, once you decide that one religion can be ring-fenced from offence, can be protected and treat it on a different level, I think you have a problem. And this is what Fleming and the others thought as well. It will be a problem.
The basis that Jews are getting special exemptions.
Let
Do
me
you?
explain it. Yes.
For consistency.
Yes, I'm against Holocaust denial.
No, on those terms. Do you go to Holland and Germany and do you say, I'm against these laws because you're giving Jews special protection?
Yes, of course. This is
Do you use that phrase? Because you're saying it's about Muslims getting special exemption. You're obsessed with Muslims. All I'm saying is, do you use the same language for Jews? Is Holocaust denial associated with Jews in the same way that the cartoon? I don't have a problem with the cartoon,
yes.
I'm a Muslim.
Yes, it is.
But
It is
you generalise about
yes,
Muslims.
no, I don't. I'm trying to talk about a specific case, but you're not interrupting me. No, you don't know the case. On Holocaust denial, the reason why Holocaust denial, why I'm stirring against it and written against it for demon, is yes, precisely because it gives one group an ownership of a part of history that cannot be touched, which I think is a problem. I think is a mistake. Apart from anything else, because as always happens, other groups notice it. When Sikhs rioted outside Behzti, I was against that because I also knew if other groups came on this, and they will, if they succeed in this, other groups will come in. Lo and behold, Jerry Springer, the opera, more evangelical Christians want to do it. If you give people the idea that one group can have protected space, other groups will follow. Other groups will request the same thing. And we see this now with the Holocaust denial laws, with other groups wanting certain parts of their own history ring-fenced. The other thing is, of course, and just to bring on Timothy's point on this, and the point that Orwell made about this, is how much weaker it makes us as a society when we say there is something that cannot be said. And one of my favourite columns of Orwell's from Tribune in 1947 or 6, I think, is his description of what you would do if you met a flat earther. And he said, what mentally thinking about it, how would I do this? He said, I could probably do the horizon thing, and the ship sailing along it doesn't remain the same. I could do certain things, but how would I actually explain to somebody that I know the Earth to be round? And what would I do if I met somebody who said, it's not flat, but it's cone-shaped? All these things are different. The point I'm trying to make is, we weaken ourselves. He says, of course, he'd have to have the worst thing of all. He recognises that he would have to say at some point, I can't explain why I know the Earth is round, but I know a man who can. This is a very useful thought demonstration to do, and this is the problem with Holocaust denial laws, is that they make us as a society no less. And I think, by the way, if you speak to certainly the younger generation of scholars now on the Second World War and the Holocaust, I would say, and I hope it's not preemptive fuddy-duddery, that they are knowing less than some of their predecessors for precisely this reason. That if you ring-fence ideas, if you ring-fence things in history, you don't have to know as much. What will these people do against David Irving? David Irving will know more than them. Because they haven't had to rub against this, they haven't had to try it out, they've been ring-fenced from offence. This is a terrible...
Well, on that point, don't you think, and this is what I'm worried, this is what I'm slightly concerned about this discussion, that the discussion is, and I'm not surprised it came down this way, but the discussion is about Islam, Muslims, religion. The discussion is not about government, state, military, which for me are the much bigger threats. We can talk. I condemn and abhor those of my co-religionists who threaten Danish cartoonists with violence. They need to get a life. And I condemn that mad Somali axeman who broke into the house recently. I remember reading it and thinking, what a nutcase. But, and I'm not apologising here, that is not the same thing as governments across the West, for example, cracking down in all sorts of different ways. For example, on free speech. You haven't mentioned at all, Douglas, nobody in the audience mentioned that more people have been killed, more journalists have been killed in the last few years by the United States military than by any radical Muslim in war zones. Journalists have been killed now by armed forces, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Israel, whether it's America. That's a much bigger threat to free speech. Journalists being killed by armed forces of free countries. Believe me, that's a much, much bigger issue, but no one talks about it.
Well, I mentioned that there's something dishonest in this, which is that, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but the British Army doesn't aim to shoot journalists. And the American Army doesn't seek the death of journalists.
Well, that's debatable.
Well,
when they bomb an Al Jazeera headquarters that they have the coordinates for beforehand twice, and when journalist unions around the world condemn it, it's very easy for you to laugh it off. Why don't you say that to the wife of the journalist?
Well, I'm perfectly happy to continue discussing this. I'm not speaking to anyone's wife about this, I'm discussing the following point, which is that as far as I know, it is not British Army policy, maybe, to shoot journalists. What you seem to imply is something quite other than that. Now, people do get killed in war zones, that's true, and no one on this panel is arguing that they should. So I don't